Hello and welcome. We have a great session today in our series of digital slide review and sign out, coming to you from the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center and a part of the Digital Anatomic Pathology Academy affiliated with Path Presenter and the Digital Pathology Association. Our case today comes from the realm of GI pathology. And I've titled it one of the misadventures in GI pathology because I'm hoping that by making people aware of this issue that we can make this a less misadventurous issue. So the story is a 77-year-old woman had some abdominal pain, went to get seen, had endoscopy, and was found to have a mass in her stomach. It was relatively small, and so an endoscopic mucosal resection was undertaken. Well, when she came back for follow-up about 4 to 6 weeks later, it was noted on repeat endoscopy that there was a residual mass. And so she was referred to our institution for evaluation of that mass. So in this sort of a situation, of course, the vast majority of times you're going to be thinking this is a recurrence of the primary tumor. It wasn't resected well. It's grown back more quickly. Maybe there's something odd going on. Occasionally in the postoperative setting, we can get the so-called spindle cell pseudotumor, but that's more frequent in the lower anogenital tract than in the stomach or upper GI tract. And then, of course, there's the possibility that this is a scar or there's abscess or there's some other sort of reaction going on, but that's usually much further down our list of differential considerations. So she came to our institution. She had a PET scan, which showed positive uptake in this area. And again, the presence of a submucosal mass, raising concern and alarm, if you will, for a very rapid recurrence of what had been previously diagnosed as a very low risk GI stromal tumor. So she came to resection, and we'll look at some of the slides that came to us. As we can see here at low magnification, the mucosa is intact, but here in the submucosa, we have a mass lesion. It's sort of bulging into the muscle. We see a little bit of ulceration, perhaps related to the prior surgery, still repairing a little bit there. And this mass appears somewhat heterogeneous. It has a mixture of light and dark areas. It's sort of bulging down the muscularis propria. Coming into higher magnification, we see that the bulk of this mass is composed of some eosinophilic amorphous material with admixed intervening cellular elements that show a degree of atypia with some nucleoli and so forth, but there also appear to be some multinucleate giant cells here in this mix of cells. Here you see some more of these. And they're sort of intermixed and associated with this stroma of variable cellularity. And as you can see, there's some degree of cytologic atypia, but this looks nothing like a GI stromal tumor, which unfortunately we did not review prior to receiving this specimen. Looking at another section, we can see in this tumor that it's got some vascularity associated with the areas above. And here you can see that it begins to dissect into the muscularis propria of the stomach. Here we see this sort of pedunculated eruptive appearance to the tumor. Well, what is going on here? This obviously does not stain with any of the markers for recurrent tumor. It's negative for DOG1, CD117, BCL2, other stromal tumor markers. This material is not a mucin. Epithelial markers are negative here. But in contrast, the vast majority of these cells stain with histiocytic markers such as CD68 or CD163. So it's apparent that this is a histiocytic reaction with the giant cells. We would conclude that this is a foreign body type of reaction. So what has gone on here? Well, to understand this, I think you need to understand a little bit more about endoscopic mucosal surgery and how that's conducted. Essentially, there are a couple of key steps. One is first identifying the lesion and determining whether or not you need to elevate or isolate it a little bit to be able to resect it. This was a fairly large lesion, somewhat submucosal, and so a generous amount of this lifting agent was used in this case before the lesion was resected. Now, the specifics of the endoscopic surgery we won't spend time on to any great degree right now, but this does raise concern about what are the sorts of lifting agents that are being used. Well, in some circumstances, no lifting agent is required, but in other settings, depending on the nature, the size, the location, various other lifting agents can be used along with augmenting agents to be able to both control bleeding, minimize that side effect, and also to help provide contrast with the lesion. So normal saline, dextrose water, these biological substances, fairly normal substances have no residual. Hydroxypropyl methylcellulose has been proposed along with hydroxyethyl starch. Hyaluronic acid has been used. And more recently entering the market have been some synthetic agents with polymers and various admixed fluids and staining agents that go by the name of Elaview and ORISE. Along with their introduction have come a number of reports of post-endoscopic mucosal resection granulomata, leading fairly recently to an actual systematic study of this situation. And in fact, the Elaview has not been identified with any of these post-operative granulomas, but ORISE granulomas or reaction has been identified in over half of cases that were identified as using it. Early on, in an immediate post-operative setting, this gel may mimic mucin. It has sort of a bluish amorphic pink color to it, but it does not stain with mucin. Longer term, however, the situation where our patient comes in, the ORISE gel evokes a very florid foreign body reaction that can penetrate the bowel wall, as we've seen, and even involve lymph nodes. It can be PET positive, as we've seen in this case and one other previous case, and thus create the impression that a primary carcinoma or other tumor has recurred and is potentially still resectable and salvageable. Histologically, the differential diagnosis includes pulse granulomas. I'll show you one in just a moment. Amyloidosis, of course, elastofibromas, and of course, clinically recurrent malignancy. Interestingly, on staining, this gel does stain with AFB stains, acid-fast stains, but it's negative with amyloid, trichrome, or mucicarmine-directed stains. So here's an example of a pulse granuloma in a soft tissue location. And you can see at low power how this might have some resemblance. We see these eosinophilic amorphous areas with intervening areas of foreign body reaction, fairly florid. But you'll notice that the sort of lamellated nature of the eosinophilic areas and its sort of undulating pattern is different. In addition, you'll have other plant-based pigments and cell walls and those sorts of things that may be associated with a pulse granuloma as opposed to the ORISE granulomas. But you can see how the differential consideration would be fairly close in this situation. So our final sign-out diagnosis was a lifting gel foreign body granuloma secondary to the ORISE lifting gel, creating the clinical impression of a recurrent residual tumor. Since this is the second circumstance in which this clinical impression of recurrent tumor has led to additional, probably unnecessary surgery, we feel it's important to raise the concern and awareness of this amongst our endoscopic mucosal resecting colleagues. ORISE gel is marketed in a very convenient fashion and does have those advantages of, some staining material to help provide contrast. But when used, the clinicians should be aware of this delayed complication, and pathologists should be alerted to that possibility as well. So we thank you for joining us on this. We hope that you found this instructive and edifying. Hopefully you won't run into this problem, but you'll be at least prepared should that problem occur in your practice. So until next time, thanks so much for joining me.